Right. Welcome in, everyone, to a brand new deep dive.
Yeah.
And especially when I say hi, if this is the first time you're joining us, we've got a really fascinating topic lined up today. And it's one that, honestly, I think is becoming more and more crucial with each passing day. AI in cybersecurity. You know, the cyber threats out there, they're not getting any simpler. They're evolving, becoming more sophisticated, more cunning. And to really get a handle on what's happening, understanding how AI is changing the whole game and who the big players are is absolutely essential knowledge now. It's not really optional anymore.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. Listeners joining us today are tuning in at like a pivotal moment, really. Think about it. The sheer volume of cyber attacks, not to mention the cleverness behind them, it's just overwhelming. Human analysts alone, no matter how skilled they are, just can't keep up. That's where AI steps in. It brings the potential to analyze these massive data sets at speeds we couldn't even dream of before. And from that analysis, it can give us insights that were honestly just out of reach until very recently.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, we've got an incredible guide to help us navigate this complex landscape. We're going to be looking closely at a report called AI Cybersecurity Architectural Comparison by Faisal Ali. Now, Faisal is an AI security researcher and strategist and the founder of AGI Red Pill. You know, when you're talking about expertise in a field that's moving as fast as this one, Faisal's insights are incredibly valuable. Big thanks to him for this report. It's a detailed, in-depth look at how AI is shaping cybersecurity, and it's going to be our roadmap for this conversation.
I've got to echo that. Faisal's report is a real gem. It cuts through so much of the hype you hear around AI and security and really gets down to the practical stuff, the specifics of what matters. It's not enough to just know that, a company is using AI. We need to go deeper. We need to understand how they're using it, what's under the hood, what's the architecture, because that's what truly determines how secure these systems really are.
Exactly. And that's precisely what Faisal does so well. He gives us this comparative look at the inner workings of some of the leading AI-powered security solutions out there. Today, we're going to focus on a few heavy hitters: Google Gemini, Microsoft Security Copilot, IBM Watson for cybersecurity, and then the AI security tools coming from Amazon Web Services. So quite a lineup, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. It's a fascinating landscape to explore. And, our mission in this deep dive is to really tease apart what makes each of these platforms tick. What are the key architectural distinctions between them? What are the unique ways they each use AI to approach security? And of course, we'll be digging into their strengths and also looking at any potential weaknesses that might emerge based on how they're designed. The goal here is to equip you, the listener, with a clear understanding of the finer points, the nuances that really make a difference when you're building a truly robust security foundation.
I like it. So listeners, get ready, because we're about to dive deep. All right, let's start with Google Gemini for cybersecurity. This seems like a really significant step forward, particularly for organizations already in the Google Cloud ecosystem. What are your initial thoughts?
It is a big move from Google. At the heart of Gemini, you have what they call security-tuned foundation models. Now, what's really interesting here is how Google has engineered these models. They're built with this capacity for multi-step reasoning. It's almost like the AI can break down a complex problem into smaller, more manageable pieces, kind of like a human analyst would. But on top of that, they can utilize these extensions, which allows them to pull in extra information from various sources when it's needed. And they're also grounded with relevant databases. This grounding, it's crucial because it keeps the AI's responses grounded in reality, so to speak. It makes them more accurate, more context-aware, which is, of course, essential in security. So picture this. You ask Gemini a question, and it doesn't just give you a surface-level response. It goes deep, analyzes the situation, pulls in additional data if needed, and gives you a well-reasoned, accurate answer. It's quite impressive.
And the data that they're using to fine-tune these models, it sounds like it's top-notch, really high-quality stuff. The report points out that Google is incorporating its own vast knowledge of the threat landscape. They see a lot. Plus the intelligence coming directly from Mandiant.
Yeah, that Mandiant integration, that's huge. You're basically taking Google's broad view of everything happening across the internet, and we all know how much data Google has access to, and you're combining it with Mandiant's frontline expertise. These are the folks who are out there every day responding to real-world cyber incidents. They're seeing the latest tactics. They know the vulnerabilities being exploited. They understand how specific threat actors operate. It's that combination of Google's big picture view and Mandiant's boots-on-the-ground experience that makes this so powerful. And then on top of that, you have Gemini 2.0, which is being described as a multimodal AI system.
Multimodal. Now, for our listeners who might not be as familiar with that term, could you quickly break down what that means in this context?
Absolutely. Multimodal, in simple terms, means that the AI can understand and process different types of data. It's not limited to just text, like traditional security logs. It can also handle images, video, audio, a whole range of formats. In Gemini 2.0, it uses a very sophisticated underlying technology called a transformer-based framework. Think of it like a super advanced way for the AI to see how all those different data types are related, how they connect. It can find patterns, correlations that older systems just couldn't grasp. For example, imagine it being able to connect a sudden spike in network traffic with a suspicious image being uploaded to a server. That ability to see the bigger picture, to connect those dots across different types of data, that's where things get really interesting, especially for early threat detection.
Fascinating. So under the hood, what's powering all of this? The report mentions the JAXX-LA framework and Google's 6th generation TPUs. For those of us who aren't deep in the technical weeds, what does that tell us about Gemini's capabilities?
Well, in essence, it tells us they've got serious computing power at their disposal. That's the infrastructure that allows Gemini to process these massive amounts of security data, and we're talking huge volumes here, and to do it quickly and efficiently. For organizations that are already using Google Cloud, the tight integration with things like Vertex AI is a major plus. It means deployment should be smoother, and you're more likely to get optimal performance because everything is designed to work together seamlessly.
And you keep coming back to that Mandiant integration. It really does seem to be one of the key differentiators for Gemini.
It's a big deal. Gemini and threat intelligence, it's the component that gives you this AI-powered access to Mandiant's frontline intelligence. This isn't just looking at historical data. It's about getting real-time insights into what's happening right now, what are the latest threats, what are the attackers doing, how are they doing it, and they've got some really neat features like Code Insight, which uses Mandiant's knowledge to help analyze code that might be malicious. It's a very powerful tool.
And that intelligence isn't just theoretical, right? These are real-world insights coming from experienced analysts.
Absolutely. The report highlights that Mandiant has over 500 experts who are constantly analyzing data from actual cyber incidents. So this isn't just book knowledge, it's battle-tested, practical expertise that's being fed into Gemini. And they take that expertise, combine it with Google's own vast threat data, and then layer on top of that the information from VirusTotal, which is this massive malware database. They call this combined intelligence Google Threat Intelligence's unified verdict. And what that gives you is a much deeper understanding of the threat landscape. It's not just a generic threat feed. It's rich, it's contextual, it's tailored to your specific situation. And that's a significant advantage for Gemini, especially when it comes to detecting and attributing threats with a high degree of accuracy.
So all of this sounds very impressive on a technical level, but let's talk about the practical side. How does all this power translate into making the lives of cybersecurity professionals easier, better?
Well, that's where Gemini in security operations comes in. It's designed to take a lot of the manual, repetitive tasks off the shoulders of security teams. Imagine being able to just ask a question in plain English, like, hey, what happened with this suspicious login attempt? And Gemini would go to work, it would pull up all the relevant contexts, analyze the situation, and then give you suggestions for how to respond. It might even walk you through the steps of remediation. It's like having a superpowered assistant right there with you.
That natural language interface, that sounds like a game changer. It could really lower the barrier to entry when it comes to understanding complex security data. And, it could even empower people who aren't deep security experts to handle some of the initial investigation work or basic tasks, right?
Exactly. The more accessible you make security insights, the better. And natural language is a great way to do that. It could lead to better overall security awareness and faster response times across the organization. And on top of that, you've got Gemini's integration with Google's Security Command Center.
Okay, let's talk about that. How does Gemini actually work within that environment?
So within the Security Command Center, Gemini can automatically summarize those high priority alerts, the ones you really need to pay attention to. Things like misconfigured systems or newly discovered vulnerabilities. It can give you the key information at a glance and then offer recommendations on how to address the issue. They also have this really neat AI investigation widget that can take a whole security case, summarize it for you, and then suggest the next steps for the analyst. This kind of automation, especially for teams that are dealing with a ton of alerts, it could free up a lot of their time and allow them to focus on the really critical stuff.
Now, all of this talk about powerful AI handling sensitive security data, it inevitably brings up the question of responsible AI and data privacy. What does Gemini's architecture look like on that front?
Well, it's clear that Google has made responsible AI a top priority with Gemini. They talk a lot about data isolation, strong data protection measures, and making sure everything complies with relevant standards and regulations. And this is important. Customers retain control over their own data. Google isn't using it to train Gemini for other security customers without getting explicit consent. That's a big deal. They've also developed this thing called the Secure AI Framework, or SAIF, which is specifically designed to make sure their AI systems are secure, that they're not vulnerable themselves.
It's also good to hear that they're thinking proactively about how this technology could be misused by the bad guys.
Absolutely. Google is actively monitoring for and working to counter any attempts by threat actors to use Gemini for malicious purposes. They acknowledge that attackers are always going to try to find new ways to exploit technology, but their current safety measures are designed to make it very difficult for Gemini to be used to create content that would aid in attacks. That proactive approach to security is crucial as AI capabilities continue to evolve.
This has been a great overview of Google Gemini. Now let's shift gears and look at how it compares to some of the other major players in this space. Faisal Ali's report gives us a very helpful side-by-side comparison, so let's use that as our guide. Let's start with Microsoft's Security Copilot. What can you tell us about its architecture and how it stacks up against Gemini?
So Microsoft Security Copilot is built on a different foundation. They're using OpenAI's GPT-4, which is another very advanced large language model, but with its own unique characteristics. And a key part of Security Copilot's design is its deep integration with the whole Microsoft 365 ecosystem. It accesses tons of data through Microsoft Graph. This includes all sorts of security signals from products like Microsoft Defender, Microsoft Sentinel, and Microsoft Intune.
The report mentions a grounding process that Security Copilot uses. Can you explain what that is and why it's important?
Sure. The grounding process is essentially how Security Copilot takes those natural language prompts you give it and makes them more specific, more relevant to your situation. It uses contextual information from your organization's Microsoft environment, things like your users, your devices, recent security events, to kind of refine your query. This ensures that the AI isn't just giving you a generic response, it's giving you answers that are directly applicable to your specific security posture. And they also use two separate AI models, one for data security and another for automated threat detection and response.
All right, so big picture, when we compare Security Copilot's architecture to Gemini's, what are sort of the key distinctions that jump out at you?
Well, one of the most obvious differences is that Gemini is multimodal, which we discussed earlier. It can handle a much wider range of data formats than Security Copilot, which is primarily focused on data from within the Microsoft ecosystem. Another big difference is in their main sources of threat intelligence. Gemini taps into the expertise of Mandiant, Google's own threat intelligence network, and VirusTotal, while Security Copilot relies heavily on Microsoft's own vast telemetry data, and let me tell you, they process a huge amount of security signals every single day.
And those different approaches to threat intelligence, to the data they're analyzing, that could have a real impact on what kinds of threats each platform is best at detecting, right?
Precisely. Gemini's ability to analyze all those different data types, plus the insights it gets from Mandiant, could give it an edge in detecting things like complex social engineering attacks or threats that might be hidden in non-textual data. And Mandiant's focus on advanced persistent threats, that could be really valuable for identifying nation-state activity. On the other hand, Security Copilot's deep understanding of the Microsoft environment and the sheer volume of data it sees within that ecosystem could make it incredibly effective at picking up threats that target Microsoft products specifically.
Great points. All right, let's move on to IBM's Watson for cybersecurity. How does its architecture compare to what we've seen so far?
IBM's Watson for cybersecurity, it takes a bit of a different approach. They're using AI and machine learning algorithms to analyze large amounts of security data, but their focus is primarily on threat hunting and vulnerability management. A key part of their architecture is what they call cognitive training, essentially. It's designed to learn from security data and get better over time at detecting threats. It can even help in developing new security solutions. Watson is also built to understand and process unstructured data, which is a big deal. Think security reports, research papers, news articles, all that stuff that's not neatly formatted in a database. It uses natural language processing to make sense of it all.
The report specifically mentions Watson's focus on identifying irregularities in network activity. How does it do that?
So Watson looks at patterns of user behavior and network activity. It establishes what's considered normal, and then it looks for deviations from that baseline. Anything that seems out of the ordinary could be a sign of malicious activity. It's designed to sift through these large, complex data sets and find those subtle anomalies that might be missed by more traditional security systems.
Okay, so when we compare Watson's architecture head-to-head with Gemini, what are the most striking contrasts?
One of the key differences is Gemini's generative AI capabilities and its tight integration across the Google Cloud platform, including Vertex AI. This gives users a lot of flexibility to build custom AI models and potentially have a smoother, more scalable experience. Watson, on the other hand, it's really well established in the security world and has a strong track record when it comes to analyzing existing security data, particularly unstructured information. And the real-time threat intelligence that Gemini gets from Mandiant, that's another big difference. Watson is more focused on analyzing historical data, whereas Gemini is designed to give you up-to-the-minute insights.
All right, last but certainly not least, let's talk about Amazon Web Services and their AI security tools.
AWS has a whole suite of AI-powered security services, and one of the most well-known is Amazon GuardDuty. GuardDuty uses machine learning algorithms to detect suspicious activity, but its focus is specifically within the AWS environment. It constantly monitors your AWS accounts and workloads using AI and machine learning, threat intelligence from both AWS and third-party sources, and behavioral modeling.
And it's primarily analyzing data generated within the AWS cloud, right? Things like CloudTrail logs, VPC flow logs, DNS logs.
Exactly. AWS provides tailored protection for their various services, things like S3 storage, EKS for Kubernetes, EC2 compute instances. It's all integrated. They've also got tools like Amazon CodeGuru Security, which uses machine learning and automated reasoning to do static application security testing, helping developers find vulnerabilities in their code before they become a problem.
So when we compare AWS's AI security tools, specifically GuardDuty, to Google Gemini, what are the main architectural differences that stand out?
The main difference is that GuardDuty is laser-focused on the AWS environment. It's using very targeted machine learning models that are designed to be super effective at detecting threats within that specific context. Gemini, on the other hand, it's got a broader scope. It's using generative AI, which means it can do more than just detect threats. It can help with response, it can analyze a much wider range of data types. So, for organizations that are all in on AWS, GuardDuty is probably a great choice. But for those with a more diverse environment, or those who need the flexibility of generative AI, Gemini might be a better fit.
This has been incredibly insightful. And to make things even clearer, Faisal Ali's report includes this really handy comparative table that summarizes the key features of all these platforms side by side. It highlights the differences in their underlying AI models, the various threat intelligence feeds they're using, the kinds of data they can analyze, and their core capabilities.
That table is a really valuable resource. It cuts through the noise and shows you the key distinctions between each platform. You can see the variety in their AI model. Some are specifically trained for security, some are more general purpose like GPT-4, and some are proprietary models developed by each vendor. It also highlights the different threat intelligence sources they're using, which can have a big impact on their effectiveness. And you can see how they each approach data analysis. Some are focused on specific types of data, while others are more versatile. It's a great way to get a quick overview of the landscape.
And it's not just about the technical specs, right? The report also digs into the cybersecurity risk considerations that are associated with each of these different architectural approaches.
That's right. How each platform is designed directly affects how well it can address different types of cyber risks. For example, Gemini's multimodal capabilities and its integration with Mandiant, that makes it particularly well-suited for dealing with those complex, multifaceted attacks. Security Copilot's tight integration with the Microsoft world, that could lead to smoother, more efficient incident response for organizations that are heavily reliant on Microsoft products. Watson's strength in analyzing large data sets, especially unstructured data, that could be really valuable for uncovering signs of those stealthy, advanced, persistent threats. And AWS's AI security tools, they're built from the ground up to protect workloads and data within the AWS cloud environment.
It's important to remember, though, that none of these AI systems are perfect. The report does mention the potential for false positives and false negatives, and that's something that applies to all of them.
Absolutely. The accuracy of any AI system is going to depend on the quality of the data it's trained on, how sophisticated its algorithms are, and how up-to-date and relevant its threat intelligence is. Organizations need to carefully evaluate those factors and constantly monitor how well their chosen solution is performing. And the level of automation that these platforms offer, that's another big consideration. It can have a huge impact on how security teams operate and how much work is placed on the analysts.
So beyond just detecting immediate threats, what about those broader cybersecurity concerns like managing vulnerabilities and making sure you're compliant with regulations?
Each platform has features that can help with those aspects. Gemini, for example, can give you summaries of any vulnerabilities it finds and suggest steps to fix them. Security Copilot, it integrates with Microsoft Intune, which can help identify and fix misconfigurations that could lead to vulnerabilities. Watson has tools for analyzing your security policies and finding potential compliance gaps. And AWS offers things like Amazon Inspector and Amazon CodeGuru Security, which are specifically designed to find vulnerabilities within your AWS environment and in your code. And then there are things like scalability and resilience, which are crucial for managing cyber risk in general. These cloud-native solutions, they tend to do really well in those areas. Of course, cost is always a factor too. You have to consider licensing fees, infrastructure requirements, and the potential impact on staffing.
And then, of course, there are the risks that are inherent to using AI itself.
Yeah, those AI risk considerations are super important to think about. We're talking about the potential for these AI models to be manipulated. Things like data poisoning, where attackers try to inject bad data into the training process, or adversarial attacks that are specifically designed to fool the AI. Transparency and explainability are also crucial. Security teams need to be able to understand how the AI is making its decisions. And it's good to see that all these vendors are taking responsible AI seriously. They're all putting a lot of effort into making sure their AI systems are developed and deployed in a responsible way. Google has its secure AI framework. Microsoft has its responsible AI principles. IBM focuses a lot on data and AI ethics. And AWS provides a bunch of resources on responsible AI. It's important for organizations to really evaluate these approaches and make sure they align with their own values and risk tolerance.
All of this leads us to a broader conversation about generative AI and cybersecurity. The report talks about the amazing opportunities it presents, but also the potential challenges. Let's start with the good stuff. What are some of the potential benefits of generative AI in this space?
I think generative AI has the potential to completely transform cybersecurity. Imagine much more sophisticated threat detection, powered by advanced anomaly detection and predictive analysis. It could automate a lot of the incident response process, making things much faster. It could help create highly tailored security policies that are much more effective than generic ones. And it could really enhance malware analysis by creating synthetic samples that can be safely studied. It could even help developers write more secure code right from the start. And then there are things like realistic phishing simulations, which can be incredibly valuable for security awareness training. And the potential for multimodal threat analysis, where the AI can combine insights from all those different data types we talked about earlier, that's really exciting. Ultimately, it's about giving security teams the tools they need to be more efficient and more effective in a world where the threats are constantly evolving.
But like you said, with great power comes great responsibility, right? There are definitely some challenges to consider as well.
Absolutely. The bad guys, they're not going to just sit back and watch. They're going to try to use generative AI for their own purposes. You could see much more sophisticated phishing campaigns that are highly personalized and very difficult to detect. They could use it to create convincing deepfakes for social engineering attacks, and the malware they create could become much more advanced and evasive. And then there's the threat of data poisoning, which could really undermine the effectiveness of AI models. We also need to make sure that the generative AI models themselves are secure and can't be compromised. And remember, even the best AI can make mistakes. So human oversight and careful tuning are going to remain essential.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of AI and cybersecurity, what are the key takeaways you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Each of these platforms, Google Gemini, Microsoft Security Copilot, IBM Watson for cybersecurity, AWS AI security tools, they all have their own strengths and weaknesses. Gemini's multimodal capabilities and its integration with Mandiant, that's a big deal. Microsoft Security Copilot, it's all about boosting analyst productivity within the Microsoft ecosystem. Watson, it excels at deep analysis of large data sets, especially unstructured data. And AWS, their AI tools are purpose-built for securing the AWS cloud.
And the best choice for any given organization is going to depend on their specific needs, their existing infrastructure, and their overall risk tolerance. There's no magic bullet here, but there are a lot of really powerful tools available.
Exactly. If you're heavily invested in Google Cloud, Gemini might be a great fit. Microsoft-centric organizations, they might lean towards Security Copilot. Companies with a lot of on-premise infrastructure and a need for deep data analysis, they might find Watson to be a strong contender. And if your priority is securing your AWS environment, well, their AI tools are a natural choice.
It's clear that AI is changing the game in cybersecurity. And generative AI, it's going to become even more important in the coming years, both for defense and offense. The ability to analyze all those different types of data, that's going to be crucial. And we need to be very mindful of the risks that come with using AI. We have to be proactive about managing those risks.
This is a field that's moving at lightning speed. We can expect to see constant advancements in both the tools that are available and the techniques that attackers are using. Staying informed, educating yourself, and taking proactive steps to implement these technologies responsibly, that's going to be essential for any organization that wants to stay ahead of the curve.
That's a great point to end on. So for our listeners out there, I want to leave you with this question. Knowing that AI is becoming such a major force in cybersecurity, what steps can you take within your own organization to make sure you're using these technologies responsibly and that you're prepared for the challenges ahead? We encourage you to dive deeper into Faisal Ali's work and check out the resources available at AGI Red Pill. They offer some really great insights into this rapidly evolving field. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.